8 tiers of creatures, 97 different tameable variants, over 500 powerful bosses, and more than 300,000 possible dino combinations. Welcome to Ark Omega. This is no simple overhaul mod. I have only 100 days to defeat a group god, a boss that combines the powers of all the gods who fall under it into one mega strong foe that has one-shot many who came to face it underprepared. So my adventure into this crazy new world began on an icy beach of Fjordor, immediately surrounded by meteors, lightnings, and just the casual Alpha Rex munching on some food. I was not going to hang around as I teleported to Asgard. Now this looked to be a lot safer. I ripped up some bushes out of the ground for berries and fiber, picked up a pebble to put into my dirty underwear's pockets, then I noticed that I already had some tools free of charge. So I pulled them out from nobody knows where before axing this rock if I could have some stone, and I ran up this small hill overlooking Asgard. And usually I take forever to get a proper base going, so I decided this would be where I would set up my base for the rest of this 100 days. I threw down some basic thatch foundations and set up my Omega workbench, the core structure that everything in Omega comes from. I spent some time harvesting trees, stones and bushes when I chose to make my first early set token. Now these tokens give you a random piece of Omega armor in this, and this mod has over 28 different armor sets, and every set comes with different abilities and perks to aid you in your journey. But I got some soulscream gloves, an armor set that I would find incredibly useful later on. As I made my way back down the mountain, I spotted some giant ants, and yeah, nope, I do not want to deal with those. I was able to sneak by as I did have the newbie buff, which makes creatures aggro to you less. I spotted a nearby bulb dog that I thought would be an easy kill, though I did first see Apache Rhino kill an Alpha Siren Alpha Raptor. Yeah, that is the actual name. And I'll explain the tiers and variants a little later on, so if you want to try Omega for yourself, you'll know how to play it. I cut up the corpse into prime meat and hide, and I set up the forge to begin smelting metal into ingots. I ran back into the bulb dog, who I bowled and started launching spears into, when I started making these weird white spots around it. I chose to run away, and it's a good thing I did, as every creature in Omega has a special ability. This was a collective, so it can collect all damage it receives before launching it outwards in a massive explosion after a few seconds. I finally killed the bulb dog and I got a Paragon soul. Now veteran Omega players all hate me right now, as Paragon souls are extremely valuable drops from creatures that can be used to rank up their power levels to the extreme. They're also insanely rare to get from a creature that isn't a Paragon. So yeah, classic YouTuber luck right there, getting a Paragon soul on your first kill, but I won't be as lucky for the rest of the video. Considering at this stage in Omega, I didn't even have an idea of what Paragon souls did. I set up a smithy in the evening to end of the day, and then I spent the morning of day 2 harvesting some fiber and berries just to start building up a healthy supply of resources. When I found a turtle, I was able to make into a porcupine to kill for its meat, hide and keratin, and set up my kibble machine. So let me explain how Omega works. Well, at least the basics of it. You get 8 basic tiers of creatures in Omega, though only 6 can spawn naturally in the wild: Basic, Beta, Alpha, Prime, Ultimate and Omega. And in each of these tiers you get 12 different classes such as Rage, Guardian, Utility and others. One of these classes have multiple variants that fall under that class. Resource class will have wood, metal, element and a few other variants. So the kibble machine allows you to make every tier and every class of kibble, but each tier requires the previous tier's class of eggs. So I'll need to tame a ton of different tiers and classes of creatures in order to progress each class up through the tiers to eventually get to Omega. There are a few exceptions such as uniques and the lucky class, but I'll cover those when we get to it. I set up an imbue workbench which allows you to buff up different items, saddles and weapons, something we're nowhere close to just yet, but we'll get there eventually. And I spent some time harvesting up metal that I could smelt into ingots, and then adventuring off in search of crystal, running up tall mountains and crossing large flat plains. I came to the purple forest only to immediately hear an incredibly ominous roar as I dropped in. And as much as I wanted to turn back, I did need some crystal. So continued onwards, eventually finding some purple nodes. I was able to harvest for the crystal so I could begin my trip home. I was a little distracted by the black hole that had formed, which is just another ability from one of the variants. Scary, right? and dropping into my base via parachute, I cleared out my inventory and made myself an awesome spyglass. So at least now I can see the names of all the deadly creatures surrounding me. I saw an injured Overlord Dodicarus in the distance, and me being the opportunistic I am, decided to glide over and try to kill it. This is an Overlord, a summoner variant, with the ability to summon lots of mini weaker versions of itself, and the Scorpion eventually stole my kill, but at least I got the basic essence and summoner souls, resources that drop from every Omega dino based on whatever class and variant it is. And that's when an ultimate brutal stego came in and started killing off all the Scorpions. And you know what? I don't mind, as it is free loot for me. So I continued to follow their battle in the morning, being careful to not get too close so I don't die, when the stego finally killed the Omega Crystal Scorpion, and that made it drop an Omega Soul. Now these are used later on to summon in gods, powerful bosses that you have to defeat in order to progress your creatures above Omega tier. I placed down my mortar and pestle so I could start producing some narcotics, and I made myself a crossbow and set out in search of a regular dino I could tame, as I needed eggs to make the first tier of kibbles, only to come across an Omega Paragon dung beetle with 2.6 million health. Yeah, I am not killing that anytime soon. I set up a bed back at my base so I could always respawn before teleporting to Vardaland, as I was playing on Ark Fyodor, a beautiful map with 4 different realms that you can explore. Loading in, I saw some dodos as well as a random rock drake that fortunately could not see me, but I tranked out some dodos before grabbing some berries and shoving them into the dodos, and that tamed them up. I trapped up the dodos into some soul balls before teleporting back to Asgard. I arrived back at home where I set up the dodos to breed, one of which I named Hakuna, one of my Twitch chat. Make sure you follow me where I stream daily. I collected the dodo egg before setting up some torches in order to incubate the egg, and in the morning I made some new trank arrows before spotting a stone moss chops, who I shot with my trank arrow, but it threw an explosive stone back at me. Yeah, that's a feature of resource dinos. They shoot explosive resources when they take damage. I did run out of arrows due to it taking reduced damage, and then even my backup arrows weren't enough. So I came in with my club in order to knock it out, grabbed my resource kibble, shoved it in, and I now had my very own stone moss chops. I found an ethereal egg that had been laid by a spectral Patrirhinosaurus, so I yoinked that to use for kibble later on, and I then spent some time with my moss chops gathering fiber, berries and wood. I fed my dodos a love potion to reset their mating cooldown, as in Omega, if you have any boosted breeding settings, the bosses get incredibly difficult. But I don't feel like waiting 2 real life days for a second baby dodo. Sorry, not sorry Hexen Lord. Waiting for dinos to breed is not for me. I just enjoy fast-paced action, which is exactly what today's sponsor aims to provide. World of Tanks is a free-to-play competitive multiplayer game for PC. In World of Tanks, you have access to a huge tank arsenal of artillery, light, medium, and even heavy tanks. How you play, completely up to you. Ark has a ton of different biomes and locations, but that is nothing compared to World of Tanks' 40+ different battle arenas, with everything from open fields to deserts and urban zones. World of Tanks is giving new players who download today using my link the Excelsior 250,000 credits and 7 days premium access. All the tanks make you truly feel like a real tank commander while driving them thanks to their historical accuracy. Download World of Tanks today using the first link in my video description, and thank you World of Tanks for sponsoring today's video. I came across a Shadowmane and a Patrirhino having an epic battle while I just looted all the corpses nearby. The Patrirhino did end up winning, thankfully. So I harvested up the Shadowmane corpse, as early game you do need tons of meat and hide. Now I was then exploring the pink forest again, doing my best to watch creatures die around me just so I could collect their early souls and essence, only to get obliterated on the sidelines. Yeah, you need to be careful when traversing around. So the first death of the playthrough, waking up at base with a massive headache. This wasn't going to be as easy as I thought. I harvested up a Colossus Velonosaur in the morning, and Colossus are massive mystical variants in Omega with higher health and damage. We'll have to tame some of these giant creatures later on. I continue to watch everything battling around as I just received all of the essence and souls, while harvesting the corpses I could. I parachuted back to the pink forest where I spotted a beta explosive bulb dog, and those who have seen me play Primal Fear No, I just have to throw some spears at the explosive dino. I did eventually hit it and was very disappointed it didn't explode. So I just moved on and found a stone mantis fighting a Gorgon Anki. The Gorgon turned me into a statue only to force me to slowly watch as the stone mantis explosions killed me off. Once I arose from my coma, I parachuted off in a fresh new direction in search of souls, and I came across rock golems fighting lightning storms and Kentros calling down beams of light from the sky to kill their enemies. Creatures in this mod are actually pretty insane, so I spent the rest of the day simply running through Asgard admiring all the creatures everywhere. Even this giant colossus gas bag. Safe to say, I was feeling a little overwhelmed early on in my playthrough, but it all suddenly clicks later on. I almost died to a Megatherium that teleported next to me, so limping away like an injured puppy, I just chose to continue exploring. I got mostly through the entirety of Asgard, so chose to move on to Vanaland and see what kind of shenanigans existed there. I was able to break some boxes on the beach for tools before running along the beach, but it eventually got too cold, so I had to stop for the night, where I set up a campfire and began to roast off some meats to end off the day. I teleported home to Asgard in the morning, only to end up freezing to death, as yeah, Fjord was a pretty cold map. Then waking up as I was running out only to get hit by a stray tornado from a moss chops. RIP. Looks like I'll be dying a lot in this 100 days. I was short of some oil to make a soul terminal, so flew off in search of the freedom fluid, where again just seeing everything around me in a constant state of conflict was insane. I eventually found some oil rocks on the north side of Arderland thanks to Kaetsu, one of my Twitch subs, as yes, these 100 days are recorded on a server open to my Twitch subs and patrons before being open to members of my Discord once I am done recording. Harvested the freedom fluid from the rocks I needed before teleporting home, where I set up the soul terminal so that I could gather more eggs I'd be needing for kibble, trapped up the dodos and threw them inside. I made myself a multi-tool, which is a pick, sickle, club and hatchet all in one, and used it to gather just a few resources, and I placed down a sink so I'd have plenty of water, and later on I was able to sneakily harvest a prime pearl snow owl for silica and black pearls, while a golden, blue mammoth and wyvern seemed to be having an electric disagreement. And it was the morning of day 7 when my newbie buff finally expired. Now creatures would actually be able to aggro onto me, so this was going to get interesting. I made myself some Gillian preparation, but it wasn't good enough.
What am I looking at?
All the bugs near my base that had ignored me till now spotted me, chased me down, and killed me. I could just see them camping my body, but thankfully I didn't need it, as even the official server for this mod uses keep inventory, so while I do lose my life, I don't lose my stuff. But as I was out exploring, I made the mistake of running past the bugs straight to my base, and I could see them coming closer, so I sprinted past them and thankfully lost their aggro. I did still have to deal with them at some point, and too bad the ants weren't the only problem, as a shadow main ate my face while I was trying to work out how to kill them. But hey, I figured if I can't kill them, I need to get this bug away. So I grabbed my spear and began to lead the ant away from my base using parachutes to simply outfly it. Once I got away, I realized I really needed a flyer, as this running around on foot was getting dangerous, when I came across this level 7 spiritual Argentavis. Now, it's an awful level, but I'll take what I can get right about now. So I tranked it out with one quick arrow to the head. However, I would need to run home to fetch my kibble, and this is when I discovered the powers I get from my gloves. The soulscream gloves allow you to punch and teleport yourselves forward, and this was pretty fun to use. And every armor piece in this mod has a special ability, so I'll be trying to collect as many unique sets of armor as possible. Once I got home in the morning, after having used the punching parachute technique, grabbed the kibble I needed and set out back towards the Argent. Much quicker this time, I might add, with the punch and parachute. Landing at the wyvern, shoved in my kibble, and it was now my friend. Trapped it up, and then as I was making home, a Gorgon hyena froze me to stone and killed me. I named the Argent Ang, only to realize I wasn't yet a high enough level for the saddle. At least it could start laying me eggs, and I managed to bola 2 of the ants near my base, a fire and a resilient, then using my multi-tool to beat them into submission for their souls and essence. I tranked out and tame a lightning tech stego to be yet another egg layer, but I also wanted to test it out, so I saddled him up, and this guy has the ability to shoot lightning balls. They don't do much damage, but I suppose this was only a level 9. We named him Stegosaurus before proceeding to murder this level 140R Bronto. It took a little bit, but I eventually killed it and harvested its flesh and skin to end off the day. And I had a shortage of eggs in the morning for more kibble, so I threw out my dodos to begin having some sexy time and made myself some mystical kibble, as I really wanted one of those Colossus creatures. Unfortunately, there weren't any Colossus terrors on the map, so I teleported over to Vardaland only to instantly die to a random rock drake. Decided to teleport to a new spot where I was able to bowl a level 137 Gorgon Pteranodon that I tranked out, shoved in my kibble, and it was mine. Soul balled it up before teleporting back to Asgard, where I instantly died to a Shadowman. This is becoming a trend. Respawning at the base, I saddled up the PT and took my first flight into the sky. I came across two Ankies battling a Colossus Scorpion, and the one Anki was just causing a massive eruption to decimate the Scorpion. Free chitin for me at least. I hatched out a bunch of dodos so they could start laying me more eggs, and I tranked out a wood dodicarus in the morning of day 10. I did have to use my club multi-tool to finish it off before flying back to base, only to run out of stamina. I had a parachute to save myself, but my terror went down, thankfully having no predators around. I got home, grabbed the kibble I needed, and zoomed off back to the dode. Tamed it up, and just in time too, as some saber-tooths attacked a nearby Anki. That could have been me dead. I made up some more set tokens at the base as I was still trying to collect a full set of soulscream, as you'll find out why later. But my dodos were all fully raised up, so I trapped them up in order to throw them into a terminal in order to generate my eggs for kibble. I was short of some resources, so did spend the remaining parts of the day harvesting trees for wood and rocks for stone, as I had a plan to build a wall. I was on my way to tame a shield megatherium only to teleport and die. Yeah, teleporting definitely seems to be dead. So I teleported again, and this time to Vanaheim, where I saw a creature summoned in a micro sun to kill the dinos around it. I couldn't quite find the megatherium, so headed off to Asgard in search of a collective stego, only to find a prime dimensional fire wyvern killing all of them. So I just parachuted out when I came across a random Pteranodon and thought this would be a good flyer, or even just good for eggs. So after having almost died and broken my legs, I shot her with my trank dart. Well, that made myself. I ran and punched my way home, only to find I was short of summoner souls for the kibble. I ran off in the morning in search of a summoner to kill for its soul. When I found an Overlord Anki, I was able to begin filling with spears, only to finally kill it without any casualties. So I started traversing the landscape where I saw Kaetsu spearing a Daedon from a cliff, and moving on, I continued in search of more summoners to kill. I finally made the kibble I needed at the base and set off back towards the Pteranodon. I instead found a level 123 Absorbent Anki that I was able to trank her out, shoved in my kibble, and had a new friend. And later I was running around when I spotted a loot tech stego that I decided to attack, only to realize that makes everything aggro onto me. Yeah, it was the end of the day when I finally got to my Pteranodon and I was able to tame it, and that took way too long. So I trapped up the terror before beginning the run home to end off the day. In the morning of day 13, I saddled up my random Pteranodon, and now random creatures are able to summon a random amount of random creatures of a random tier of a random variant. Feeling random yet? So I randomly sent in my random minions, and they're actually pretty powerful. So I spent a little time just sending in my minions to fight all the nearby creatures. Once I got home, I learned the engram for an ethereal spear. Now if you're playing Omega, I recommend you get one of these as soon as possible. This spear is also the sole reason I actually wanted a full set of soulscream armor, and I began to run around throwing my spear at everything, only to get killed by a prime spiritual titanomir soldier. Yeah, I hate these bugs. So I ran off to keep farming dinos with my spear for their souls and essence, only to die again. I spent the remaining parts of the day harvesting a ton of resources for my wall, as I was tired of these damn ants killing me at my own base. So I replaced my thatch with some stone, as well as planned out my future wall. In the morning, while I was hanging out at my base, I spotted a lightning poison wyvern flying overhead, only for it to come straight into my base. This is why I need to build up more. Eventually, after the wyvern flew off, I was out exploring again before spotting a plague Pteranodon. So I bowled it, threw a spear in its head, and died. Well, I got back to the terror, bowled it again, and this time threw the spears from slightly farther away in order to kill it. I started killing an alpha teleported dung beetle, but I didn't quite realize he had a friend. Yeah, Ouch. As it turned to day 15, I found a level 137 rampage Maywing that I tranked out, but I was short of the kibble I needed. Thankfully, my base was close and I was able to grab the kibble I needed before feeding it to the Maywing, who I chose to name Uber Snuples. As those who watched my hardest boss video will know how much we loved Snuples. So I saddled him up and leaped off to go test out the Maywing. Now this Maywing is a rampage, which has a cool ability you can activate, and the more damage you do, the less damage you take, and increases your damage dealt. I got my first ever magic charm from this wood and Kylo that I killed fairly easily, as I could just barely flop to victory. Tranked out a spectral snow owl that I was able to tame pretty quickly, and in the afternoon I teleported to the main realm before gliding around in search of I don't even know what. I did come across a cave I chose to explore on foot in hopes of loot. Yeah, since Omega buffs everything, caves are not exactly safe. But I still wanted loot, so I flew off towards the loot cave, only for Uber Snuples to get one shot. Now that death hurt. Rest in peace, Uber Snuples. As I rose back home in the morning, I was feeling the death of Snuples, so I traveled out in search of a new one, but the shortage of kibble was rough. I instead found a siren snow owl I wanted and tried to get by punching into the sky, only for it to not stop ascending and disappear. And on my way home, there was a rock golem fighting an essence mammoth that I threw a spear at, forgetting that attacking lucky creatures makes everything aggro onto you. Stuff still aggroed onto me? Oh, it's still aggroed onto me. Hold. After dodging and weaving, I got home without dying, and I set off on my Gorgon PT towards a beta Firestorm Tech and Kylosaurus. Trapped up my PT just to keep it safe and began to trank out the Yankee. Shoved in my kibble, tamed it up, and trapped it in a ball to end off the day. Before the sun even rose on the morning of day 17, I bowled and clubbed out a knockback Pteranodon that I was able to tame before continuing on my way home, where I saddled up my Firestorm Tech Anki and used it to harvest some flint while burning everything around me. I have to say, this Tech Anki looked good, decently strong too, as I fought and killed an alpha flying stone ant. I set up some stone foundations that I'd be using for a greenhouse, placed down some crop plots, but now I needed a dung beetle for fertilizer. So parachuting towards the pink forest, I tranked and tamed a pearl dung beetle, brought it home and stuck it in a soul terminal in order to passively convert poop to fertilizer. I tamed a harvesting moss chops that afternoon, and harvesting creatures are part of the utility class. Now this is a bit of a shock, but they're really good at harvesting. And in the morning, I was still testing out my harvesting moss chops before changing my targets for something a touch more powerful, an eruption pteranodon. So I began my flight through the Crimson Forest, where I eventually landed and bowled the PT, tranked, tamed, and trapped it up. Another egg layer for the collection, only to die to a prime comet Dodic on my way home. You can never feel too arrogant with this mod. There is always something to snuff you out. I saddled up the Terror before killing off an Anki nearby, and I did try fighting a beta Soul Scorpion, but just couldn't simply hit it, even with the massive meteors launching out of my Terror's head. So I tried to bowl it and rip. Crafted up some more set tokens in search of more soulscream pieces, only to get none. So the next day was spent hunting down tames with my ethereal spear for their essence and souls, and early on in Omega you really need to be farming these two things, but that's why I wanted soulscream armor, as soulscream armor is designed specifically to buff the ethereal spear. I got home to clean up my inventory, only for flying ants that had followed me killed me again on my own base. Respawning, I quickly punched away before boloing the ant so I could run away, only for his friend to catch me and kill me. Decided to avoid my problems by spawning somewhere new and spend some time murdering some poor defenseless dodos, lystros, and parasaurs. My massacre was ongoing in the morning of day 20, running around throwing spears, farming essence and souls, and I needed a ton of this stuff in order to make more kibble, so I could keep progressing through the tiers, only to end up dying to an ultimate Earth Storm Dilo. So I decided to do something slightly safer and cracked open a bunch of set tokens, and I even got my second piece of Soulscream. Now with 2 sets of Soulscream, that increases my ethereal spear to 200% damage. In the afternoon, I headed out where I spotted a phoenix roll rat bopping its head against the spike wall. So I killed it, but it burst into flames and actually revived itself. Well, I suppose it is a phoenix after all. And as I continued across the beach, I found a small treasure chest. Now this needed 429 beta essence to unlock. A bit too rich for my blood at this stage. But then a dodo decided to drop a plasma beam on my head, killing me. I died another 8 times by the time of day 21. And yeah, I didn't even know what I was doing yet, and this mod can be pretty punishing. I probably should have done more than just run around blindly, but hey, I needed essence and souls. However, all the deaths yesterday gave me a plan. I was going to run around the main realm collecting chests, so I teleported over and began running along the beach, only for a raptor to jump me. So I bowled and began spearing it, only for it to activate its blue floaty balls thing, which reflect all damage back to the attacker. Safe to say, the raptor got the better of me. So I spawned in at the same spot to take my revenge, and as I continued across the beach killing what I could, I found an Omega frenzied dodo that I was able to begin killing by whacking over the head with my flaming club. Finally killing it at the end of the day, I unlocked some tech grounds, but got no loot of any real value. In the morning, I continued to have death after death after death. I was not giving up, as I hunted, bowled, speared and clubbed everything I could, including trying to kill a Paragon Lystro, but his friend, the prime fire skeletal Therizino, decided I was breaking the law. I respawned and came across a random tech woolly rhino, and just wow, some of these creatures look awesome. I got assassinated by a prime lightning Dilo, and I've just died so many times at this point. In fact, you can see how many on screen here. I woke up and made myself a glider suit, as this would greatly speed up my traversing around the map as I farmed the essence and souls I would need. I came across the beta random Pelagonus in the morning of day 25 that I was able to bowler, shove in my kibble and tame. I teleported into Asgard only to be instantly surrounded by tons of dangerous creatures. The Pelagonus died to a giant ant as I ran for my life. I crafted myself a net gun, a small handheld weapon that shoots nets. Surprising, I know. I used it to trap a beta fairy Dimorphodon that began to club to death, and then I almost died to a treasure ant, but managed to barely escape with my life as I punched away from it. Too bad I never ran far enough. On day 26, I was paragliding to where Beta Colossus Carno that I started tranking out by floating above it and shooting down. So once I got home, I saddled up the colossal beast, and now I felt pretty damn strong. Up until I saw that Omega Siren Shadowmane chasing me as I ran away. So I instead went to go fight other lesser creatures. So I named the Carno Chonkosaurus and teleported down to the beach when I saw a little scout that I chose to fight, only to learn the hard way that it was a self-destructive. Rest in peace, Chonkosaurus. So much for having a good tame. So for the rest of the day, I opened dozens of set tokens to get myself a full set of soulscream. Now with the full set, I unlocked a range of abilities. My spear now explodes in an AoE, dealing debuffs. I deal 300% more damage, and I gain dimensional vision. So now I am no longer affected by water or fall damage. This was an amazing upgrade. Though I still got murked by a Velonosaur who just simply shredded me with its spines. And I continued to explore the beach, although, can you really call it a beach now that the water was completely gone thanks to my armor? So the sharks are basically flying through the sky, and this was pretty damn trippy. It was pretty fun though, running around with my spear, killing everything, even if I was getting killed by even compies. I wanted to start collecting some of those treasure chests, so I jumped to begin gliding through the missing ocean towards a beta treasure chest jellyfish, as when you kill a treasure creature, it gives you a buff which highlights the location of all chests. So after killing it, I opened a nearby beta chest and got some souls, a combo and some armors, and I was about to loot a second one only to get sniped by an alpha water titanoboa. So that death made me lose my treasure buff, but I still wanted more chests and ran around killing whatever I could and dying to whatever I couldn't. But at least I was getting a few chests, and this is actually a strategy I recommend if you're doing Omega for yourself. Run around killing whatever you can and collecting the chests you find, and these chests do cost essence to open, but the more essence it costs, the better the loot. Most of the time anyway. Found another chest under the missing water, and this armor is actually fantastic for this, since you can see through the water to spot those missing chests. I killed a Moschops in the morning of day 29, and that dropped my very first quest. Now quests in Ark Omega are a pretty cool feature, as you need to hunt specific dinos in different ways in order to give you bonus Paragon souls. But this quest was not one I could do right now, as I would have to kill 2,000 dinos while riding a mantis. I don't even have a mantis.
I can't do it. I can't do it.
I managed to kill an alpha treasure Dilo for the loot buff, only to get spotted by a piranha and murdered. I found another chest I was able to loot, and this gave me a warp bow. A very powerful weapon which is amazing for tranking, even if I didn't realize it just yet. I crafted up a ton of kibble to end of the day, as I wanted to finish up the few missing tiers I needed. So I was gliding through the ocean in the morning of day 30, before eventually getting to my destination, a Starfire Pteranodon. one of the cosmic variants, the class with one of the most powerful abilities. I tamed up the Terror as this was to be an egg layer, before setting off on a raft which, due to the missing water, made it look like it was just flying through the sky. I'm just glad there was no flying lead sichies. And in the morning, I tranked and tamed a zombie dodo, one of the nightmare variants, and I killed a metal spiner which happened to have a loot dialer underneath it to give me some basic stuff. Then using my warp bow, I was able to trank out a volatile pteranodon only to get sniped by an alpha thunderstorm dodo. So I got back, took out all the dangers with my spear and net gun, and tamed up the pteranodon to end off the day. I found a fire pteranodon in the morning I was able to tame, one of the elemental variants, before moving on and taming a shield dodo, a guardian variant. Now, I've spoken a lot about all these tames and variants, but allow me just a moment to explain why. Ark Omega is basically an MMORPG. You have to truly build a fully functioning team composition in order to fight the bosses. You need a tank, healers, DPS, supports, and more. You can't get away with just taming a high level Rex, breeding it 20 times, and left clicking the boss till it dies. So all these tames was me building a foundation to tame the strongest creatures I could in order to fight the bosses later on. I tranked out a thunderstorm compy. Yeah, it tried to zap me to death, but I tamed it up before moving on to the next tame, and I was parachuting over to a breeding compy only for a void worm to try and attack me, but I managed to get away and tame the compy I wanted. Though this compy was fairly important, as this was the final class I needed to have every class at beta tier. So the morning of day 34, I set up an egg collector, a claw machine that boosts the speed of how fast creatures lay eggs. However, placing creatures in the machine will destroy them. So I spent the morning throwing out all my egg layers in order to sacrifice them, and I wanted to start taming some ultimate tier creatures, but I was short of the souls. So I spent the day hunting ultimate creatures, which are pretty powerful, but the ethereal spear made me able to kill them. On day 36, I set up a bunch of set mannequins so that I could easily keep track of what armor sets I had, as well as what I still needed to collect. I spotted a beta dimensional mammoth over the top of my base, and dimensional creatures are not affected by gravity or even water, so I had to try grappling and parachuting in order to shove in my kibble and tame up the mammoth. I saddled him up before flying off to gather some berries, thatch and wood, and we named him Dumbo since, well, he was a flying elephant. In the morning, I set up a grill and generator inside my box before using it to cook up an absolute feast, before teleporting into the main realm only to die in 0.25 seconds. So I did the only logical thing and teleported there again. Yeah, that was an alpha meltdown Arctic Titan. The place I was wanting to teleport to was Boss Fight Island. So now the Titan was gone, I teleported in again and clutched a net on an Omega Phoenix deer and began to spear it. But thankfully it ran away as I could not kill that, but in came Flameheart, one of my Twitch subs, and they were able to kill it. But I placed down my boss arena, a massive structure designed to keep bosses from escaping and wreaking havoc across the server. I wasn't quite ready to fight any bosses myself, but others on the server were. I was gliding towards a beta supernova trilobite, which killed me as I shot it with a trank arrow. So I got back in the morning after gliding through the ocean, shoved in my kibble, and now I had a trilobite that dropped these pretty powerful explosions. I wonder if I could find a stronger one. So I continued to run along the ocean floor to collect chests and tame some more beta variants. Now, I was finally starting to make some real progress, as I had realized no matter what, trilobites were always one kibble tames. So I was taming multiple trilobites to be egg layers all the way to the end of day 39, when I was taming a beta breeding trilo that I knocked out, but was short the one utility soul I needed for the kibble. So I killed a breeding coelacanth in order to get that. Then got back in the morning and I was able to tame it up. I was making really good progress on these variant tiers. So once I got home, I chucked them all into the claw machine before putting on my prospector armor, making me look like a tin can, as the prospector makes you harvest way better and carry more. So using this newfound power, I was able to complete my wall and greenhouse. I tamed myself a beta rampage skeletal rock trek before teleporting it home, though I did need red gems to make the saddle. Traveled to the app cave where I was able to harvest them up, saddled up the drake, and this guy was fun to glide around on, so I named her Bony Girl. The rampage ability made this girl great for fighting. And in the morning of day 42, I tamed myself a beta meteor thorny dragon, as I had the goal to get myself to the Omega cosmic tier. But I still wanted to test out the thorny, so I saddled it up before fighting an earth stego, while shooting spindles and raining down meteors. Then I was on my way home only to get sniped by a prime brutal ant, killing me and my thorny dragon. I crafted up myself some unique weapon tokens. Now uniques in this are more powerful weapons with special abilities. You can also get unique saddles, but the weapons are more useful to me for now. One weapon I got is the Mercenary, which is a sword designed to fight the light key variants. So I equipped in my gifted set and glided down to a loot Kentra I easily killed with the sword. The loot wasn't great, but it was just a basic, so I ran to a prime loot Maywing, but it had too much health and just flew away. I used my gifted set to kill Beta Essence Dimetrodon for some more essence, only for a Paragon duck to come over and kill me. So I flew off again, where I managed to snipe a low health Alpha Soul Patchy Rhino, as well as an Alpha Essence duck, and in the afternoon I managed to trank out a Beta Absorbent Voidworm, only for a prime taming golem to decide he didn't like my Voidworm. I began to aggro it away and died. Yeah, rip. I got back to my Voidworm after respawning, tamed it up, and well, its damage output sucked. But that's because this is an absorbent. Variants that can create a bubble and redirect all damage your tames in that bubble receive to themselves. I named the Voidworm Cheetah, as was suggested by my Twitch chat. I was hunting loot creatures late into day 44 when my tracker showed me a prime loot Lystro, but it was meshed, so I spent way too long trying to glitch myself into the terrain. Though finally in the morning, I was able to stick myself into the cliffside just enough where I was able to spear it, and that made it run out, where I could then kill it with my sword. I flew into the ocean to fight an alpha loot trilobite, and I would have used my sword, but without the gifted armor it wouldn't do much damage, and if I took off my soulscream set, I would start to drown. After eventually killing it and stealing its loot, I found a prime treasure trilobite and began to slowly kill it. I did try to cage it, but that just simply let it walk, swim, crawl out the cage, so I just abandoned it for now. As in the morning, I was invited to come have a look at my first boss. A treasure dodo wyvern with 10 million health. Now, my spear dealing 133 damage wasn't doing very much, but this gave me a good idea of where I have to get to if I want to face bosses. So I continued my search before finding an alpha singularity trilobite to end off the day. Now this trilobite summons literal black holes, sucking up everything and dealing insane damage. But I needed it as an egg layer, so I sacrificed it to the claw. I made a unique token, and that gave me Destiny, the unique ethereal spear. A spear that can roll insane damage multipliers for huge critical hits when used to melee. Even I do still die to a basic windstorm Andrewsarchus. On day 48, I finally cut my hair to become myself. Natural causes, totally professional Ark player that definitely hasn't died over 70 times already. I tranked and tamed a prime Colossus and a prime Gamma Ray, so I now had prime tier mythical and cosmic variants. And I set up a soul furnace, an incredibly powerful forge that uses souls as a fuel source. And in the morning, I teleported to Baylor's honey den, as I needed the organic poly and honey, but the prime treasure ant decided I didn't need any more. Twice. So I flew off to steal some flowers from someone's gravesite, and I came up to an ultimate Colossus compy in the afternoon, and this thing has a lot of torpor, so I equipped a full set of gravity armor, and this armor boosts the effectiveness of the warp bow. So I was able to snipe down the compy and trank it out, shoved in my kibble, and it became my friend. I now had the final piece I needed to be able to tame Omega mythical dinos. This is where you might think, nah, I could just beat the final boss, but oh how wrong you are. We are not even in the end game yet. And hey, if you're enjoying this so far, consider subscribing. You can always unsubscribe later if you change your mind. After dying like around 11 times on day 50. I killed a loot trilobite in the morning of day 51, and that gave me a mud cake slice. This cake slice will give me a very interesting tame. So I munched on the cake slice, and that started a 5-minute timer. So I decided to use the time to fly over to an Omega Earth trilobite I could kill for its essence, only to die to the basic tornado trilobite. But respawning at home, I gave birth to a Craptor. Not just any Craptor, an alpha plague craptor. So while that was raising up, I teleported to Jotunheim, the ice realm of Fjordor, as there was an Omega Phoenix Calico I wanted. So after killing a Prime Anki, I began to trank out the Cali, but I was short of the kibble I needed. So I took off to hunt down some more Omega Dinos for their souls in order to make more kibble. Though that did result in a few deaths like an idiot. Finally got the final soul I needed from an Omega Pygmy Trilobite, got back to the Cali, tamed it up, and saddled it. Now, Phoenix tames are great, as they have an insane heal they can use and will also revive if their corpse is not harvested. So I used the Cali to fight an Omega Resilient Therizino, as well as murked a pack of wolves. It felt good to be strong. But I'd been told of something potentially even more powerful, an Alpha Colossus Griffin. I eventually tranked it out, ran over to shove in my kibble and died to a minion. I eventually got back and was able to save the griffin before it died, and jumped on its back and began to swoop down and kill everything on the beaches with my massive swoop attack. We named the griffin Jim, then flew off to fight an Omega loot Parasaur with my Cali, and then finally killing it in the morning. I got some Ascendant loot, but nothing super useful. So I headed off to the next Prime loot dino, which was killed really easily, even if it was under the invisible ocean. I had eaten another mud cake slice that pooped out a Prime knockback Craptor, and with how much time I was spending in the ocean, I tranked out an Omega Colossus jellyfish from Jim. Using my warp boat, so I parachuted down to it, shoved in my kibble, and rode on the jelly, and just wow, this thing was doing some insane damage. And as the sun was rising in the morning, I killed an element trilobite that I was able to harvest up 400s of element. It was great. Now I was continuing to hunt loot dinos when my tracker led me into the swamp cave, where the ultimate loot Desmodus instantly picked me off my mount and killed me. It took me 3 deaths before in the morning of day 56 I got back to my Cali, who I at some point named Fish, and I killed off the nearby creatures before hopping on Jim to kill off the Desmodus, only to get picked and die. I now desperately had to save Jim and Fish, and I was in a race to save my 2 best tames while fighting through the cave. I eventually got to Jim and trapped him up before just whistling Fish to kill the Desmodus, which he actually did pretty easily. The loot wasn't great, but I was just happy that Fish and Jim had survived. Teleported over in hunt of an ultimate loot Ichthy, and Fish the Cali was a great swimmer. I defeated a Prime Cursed Compy in the morning, and now cursed creatures drop a variety of loot before flying off to another cursed creature, and this is where I messed up. I threw out Fish as a plan to use him to kill the Megalodon, only for the missing ocean to completely mess me up as I could not get to Fish.
Oh, that challenge. No!
Rest in peace, Fish. You will be missed. I was truly devastated. But now I wanted a replacement. So I wanted an Omega Cosmic. And in order to achieve that goal, I tranked and tamed an ultimate Gamma Ray Trilobite, as I would need the ultimate eggs in order to make the Omega Kibble. I got home and threw the Trilobite into the claw machine to begin generating me the eggs I would need, and once the Trilobite was laying me some eggs, I found an Omega Gamma Ray Pteranodon that I was able to knock out, shove in the kibble, and tame up the PT. Now, this PT would be strong, but it wouldn't be very tanky. And that's when I found an Omega Gamma Ray Stegosaurus. It had 1.5 million torpor. So I began to trank it out with my warp bow from the back of Jim, and I was short of the Omega essence I needed, so using Jim I began to hunt down every Omega I could find, till I eventually had enough for the Omega Cosmic Kibble I needed. Teleported over to the Stego, shoved in the kibble, and it became my friend. So I trapped her up, threw on a saddle, and now using the Stego was able to call down what's basically the Bifrost to deal some insane damage. Now this was going to be my boss killer. I just would need to make it a little bit stronger, and for that I would need Paragon souls. It was day 60 when I arrived at not one Paragon Stego, but 2 of them. So I jumped on my Stego and waddled in to take them out. With the damage, the fight took really long, but I was able to kill them both and even got a quest from one of them. So using the Paragon souls, I was able to massively boost my Stego's health and melee. And that's why Paragon souls are so powerful. Not only can they be used to make items that can rank up your dinos to a higher tier, but they give your creature a 100% bonus stat boost. So me using 2 of them on my Stego made it so that it had 300% stats in total. The quest was even one that would give me even more Stego Paragon souls. And I'll admit, this is the point where Omega gets pretty grindy, as you need to farm to build up your boss killing team and add as many Paragons as you can in order to begin fighting God. It felt good to be able to just roam on my Stego and fight off whatever I needed to. Even an Omega Cursed Fire Wyvern stood no chance to my Stego, as I used my Bifrost attack to simply shred through it. I found and killed an Omega Cursed Rex as well, since I just really wanted some better items, but I got nothing useful. And I wanted to make an Omega Beacon, a structure that's used to summon in bosses, but I was short of metal. Of course I was. So I went out in my tin can suit to harvest it up, chucked it all into my soul forge before teleporting to Boss Fight Island, then placed down the beacon in the morning of day 62 and summoned in my first boss, a Pygmy Manticore.
Pygmy Manticore? Easy. Boom.
It went down like a piece of cake. So I wanted to fight more. The next one was a Gorgon Broodmother, and this is where I learned I can use my spear to apply a cursed debuff, which increases the damage that my stego does. So I spent some time just farming these bosses for their essence and tech round, the hardest of which was a Phoenix boss, as if you don't jump off and harvest the corpse fast enough, the boss will revive itself. And day 63 rolled around and I'll admit I was feeling confident, so I wanted to fight a beta boss, and me not understanding how this mod works, decided to summon in a beta lucky boss. Now not only does this boss have 5 times the health, but it also has 90% evasion, so I was missing so many attacks. This fight was taking forever, with me barely doing any damage and the stego not even realizing the dragon was attacked. It was taking so long that I actually invited my Twitch subs who were watching me live to come out and just help me speed this up a bit, since I was on a time limit and didn't want to wait. Once we finally killed it, me being, well, me, completely disregarded how long that took and chose to summon in another beta lucky boss. Smart, right? This time it was a beta loot Dodo Rex, which didn't have the evasion, but instead had damage reduction. Now, it might just be me, but 90% damage reduction feels a whole lot easier to kill than the 90% evasion. In order to start building up my team comp, I found myself an Alpha Potion Doedicurus. Now, Potion Dinos are a utility variant that can force feed health potions to your tame. Now, this Potion Dino would not be very tanky, so I was going to need something to keep it safe. So I wanted to at some point get myself an Absorbent variant. I just still needed to get my Guardian class up to Omega, and in order to achieve that, I tranked and tamed an Alpha Reflective Trilobite before heading back into Asgard, as there was an old friend waiting for me, an Alpha Colossus Maywing. Using my glider, I was able to easily follow it and trank it out before heading back, shoving in the kibble, and it was tamed. Of course, we had to name him Giga Snuples. Saddled him up at home and I was in love. So in order to complete the look, I gave Giga Snuples the ever appropriate hat, and now he was perfect. I adventured off to kill another Paragon stego, and with the Impale Bifrost combo, it was an insane amount of damage. In the morning, there was another Omega loot jellyfish on the map, so I jumped on my Colossus jelly and just obliterated everything. I got an Ascendant warp bow from a Coelacanth goodie bag, so this would help trank things out faster, including this Alpha Absorbent Trilobite. After I had that, I spent the remaining parts of the day farming souls and essence using my jellyfish, who I had named Squishy, and I shall call him Squishy, and he shall be mine and he shall be my Squishy. Come on Squishy, come on little Squishy, it's time we go out hunting. Squishy managed to easily kill a Paragon jellyfish, which I used to make Squishy even more powerful, before killing a Paragon Trilobite as well, as I had the idea to buff up my Absorbent Trilobite into Omega tier, and use that as my tank, as if you remember, Absorbent Dinos make that protective bubble, and with how many Trilobites spawn on this map, I was able to quickly find and kill another 2 Paragons for their souls. And it was on day 68 where I crafted myself a Mastercraft Stego saddle, before using my Imbue workbench to combine the saddle with Alpha Essence in order to give it unique stats. In this case, I got a bonus 13% ability damage, as well as reducing impulse taken by 46%. Now, some of these imbues can get a little crazy, but they are absolutely key to fighting the strongest bosses later on, such as gods and even group gods. Spent the entirety of day 68 taming up the rest of the alpha classes I needed, until I had every class up to the next tier, and would be doing this quietly in the background for the next few days. In the morning of day 69, nice, I was after an alpha crystal trilobite, when Twitch chat and I noticed a bright white trilobite. Now this was no ordinary trilobite, this was a unique. This was Spirit. Uniques are an incredibly rare dino in Ark Omega. They are a combination of 2 variants fused into 1 dino, giving it the stats and abilities of both variants. Shoved in the kibble and it was mine. The damage as a beta with 0 levels put in was insane. Spirit could use the Stalker ability to go invisible, and then use the Supernova ability to drop nuclear suns on all creatures around it. So once I got home, I set up a DPS dummy, and without the Stalk Invis, the attack did 70,000 damage. Activate Stalker mode, and it dealt 640,000 damage. I used some of my Trilobite Paragon souls to rank up the Spirit all the way to Ultimate, and I needed some Omega Essence to get to Omega, and now Spirit dealt 6.2 million damage. This is exactly what I needed to be able to get to my goal of defeating a group god. A boss that felt so far away, as I hadn't even fought a god yet, and group gods are gods that have all the abilities of all the gods in their class. This was about to get exciting. I just first wanted Spirit to be an Omega, so using Jim, I flew out to begin killing off every Omega I could find for their essences. But Jim wasn't dealing quite the damage I wanted, so out came Spirit, and as I stalked towards an Omega Volatile Valona, humming the Jaws theme song, bam! Massive overkill. It was glorious. Being able to one-shot even Paragon dinos with my Spirit, I genuinely just could not stop smiling. Nothing stood a chance face to face with my Trilobite. Being able to just stalk up to things and nuke them instantly was just perfect. So I chose to name Spirit after the theme song I'd been humming, so say hello to Lack of Jaws. I wanted to give Lack of Jaws a true test of power, so I summoned in the Gamma Ray Dodo Wyvern. Yeah, I one-shot it. A boss with 15 million health. One shot by a Trilobite. It wasn't a fluke either, as I one-shot another one. I spent almost the entirety of day 71 and 72 simply flying on Squishy through the ocean, killing thousands of creatures for souls, essence, and quests, when I wanted to investigate a Titan. So I flew down into the mines of Moria, where the Alpha Spiritual Titan was waiting. Let's nuke it with Spirit.
Durnin, 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 durnin. Oh, 142k.
Well, that did not go to plan. So, the Titans have a minimum number of times you have to attack them in order to kill them. So yeah, Spirit with the nuke damage was not going to work. Day 73 was again spent farming through the ocean when I got a notification that the Paragon god had grown angry. So I was scanning to see how much health it had when it came to getting absolutely massacred. Rest in peace, Squishy.
I wasn't paying attention. I was reading the stream. No, Squishy. Squishy! No!
Man, that really sucks. I took revenge using my stego to just get my revenge against all the fish who had killed my Squishy. In the area, however, was another unique. This was Host, the unique Eurypterid, a combination of the Siren and Necromancer variants. But there was something special about a Host though, as not only do you get uniques in Omega, but you also get hybrids by breeding different creatures. And Host was one half of the unique Triceratid, Tumult. So I would need to keep my eyes open for the second half of this potentially incredibly powerful hybrid. And I wanted to farm some more electronics in the morning of day 75, as with only 25 days left, I had to get a move on. So I summoned in some bosses to one-shot with Lack of Jaws, as these bosses gave a decent chunk of resources, but I mostly wanted to test out Jaws damage. So I stuck around while others on the server were summoning in alpha lucky bosses with 50 million health, dealing 44 million damage when my attacks actually hit. Safe to say, I was definitely the one carrying. So I spent the remaining parts of the day just mass farming with Lack of Jaws, killing dozens of Trilobites in order to farm quests, Paragon souls, and essences, running along the ocean floor and teleporting in my Jaws before decimating them with my Supernova. Run, teleport, Supernova. It was a ruthless cycle, but this is what I understood at the time to be the most effective way to farm Paragon souls, up until you can fight the Paragon god. Then at the end of day 78, I actually got pretty lucky and killed 3 Paragon Trilobites that had spawned while I was offline, while my farming continued into day 79 when the Arctic Titan appeared, and I decided it was time for round 2. So I flew down into the Moria mines, where I jumped on Jaws and was still only doing 100k damage a hit. So I brought in my Gamma Ray Stego, and this was much more effective, so I was able to just drop the Bifrost on the oversized Jotun in order to kill it. What I didn't see was the Miracle Monkey hiding behind it, with 100 million health and a ton of evasion. This thing was going down really slowly, so I chose to teleport out, but I was not giving up. as I climbed onto his spirit, and all it would take is for my attack to hit once. First, second, third and fourth attacks all missed. I was continuing to miss every attack as it started to heal up again. Boom! Miracle Monkey has been nuked. And all it took was a single hit. Now something I didn't quite realize is that was a god, and that gave me a miracle god soul. Now using a god soul on your creature will ascend it from Omega to Godlike. So I definitely wanted to get my Stego and Jaws to Godlike. So I now had a goal. I set up a tech replicator at my base as I could craft myself a cloning chamber that I placed down in the morning, and I wanted to clone Jaws, except I didn't have the 6 million shards I would need in order to do so. So that would have to wait. I took some time to try and hunt down element dinos that I could harvest for their resources, but to gather 6 million shards would be an absolutely insane amount. So while I was out, I killed an Omega loot compy, and one of the items I got was a getaway orb. Now, getaway orbs are a fantastic item as you can use it to summon a free tame in order to travel across the map without any risk of losing your own. So I used it to travel to an Omega loot compy. I was able to crack for some goodies, even if his friends didn't like me afterwards. But that's okay. Jaws was shredding. Jaws was without a doubt my most important tame at this point. I couldn't see a single way I would complete this mod without Jaws. My Gamma Ray Stego was pretty powerful too, as I used it to dominate the ice cave, shredding through all the Prolovia desperately trying to pounce me. But Stego was big strong. In the morning, I figured before I try to clone Jaws, I should get it to Godlike. So that meant I had to fight a Trilobite god. Place down my god egg, a massive structure where you can sacrifice boss souls, or in my case, a unique god token in order to hatch gods. So I placed in the token and summoned in the Trilobite god. That was easier than I expected. Yay! I now have my Jaws to be a Godlike. Let's go! And now with my newfound godlike powers, I wanted a true test, as that Trilobite god was just a puny god. So I summoned in an Omega Zombie Megapithecus with 500 million health. I two-shot it, so I was currently dealing 255 million damage. Absolute madness. But I was going to need some more protection, so by putting all my points into crafting skill, I was able to get a much higher armor saddle that I then imbued with boss essence to give it some epic enhancements. So now I felt a lot safer on my Trilobite. Let's test it out by fighting a god. And of course, it stood no chance. Made myself 3 more god eggs before grabbing a Gamma Ray boss soul so I could godlike my Stego. Placed down the egg and out-hatched the Gamma Ray god. Get squashed. I one-shot both gods like they were mere ants I could squash. The third god I fought, I didn't quite one-shot, but was able to finish it off with the second hit. So I spent the rest of the day just farming some bosses, and then in the morning I saw the worst possible message. The treasure god had grown angry. This was Gobbles. Now, I was live streaming and chat was insistent that I could kill, even though I was incredibly against it, but they finally managed to convince me to go check it out. So I began the descent back into the mines of Moria before hopping on my Jaws as we scampered towards the golden turkey.
Got 5 billion health.
My vision blurred. I had desperately tried to pump healing potions, but it was too late. Lack of Jaws was dead. I was distraught. I didn't know what to do. The tame I had worked for days to grow and strengthen was dead. But you don't sit back and give up. No, you get back up and you fight to recover. So in the following days, I placed down a grave in remembrance of Jaws as a small shrine when I saw in my creature finder that there was a beta spirit on the map. This was it, my opportunity for redemption. So I managed to trank and tame the spirit, but now I needed more paragons. I chose to name the spirit Missing Jaws Revenge, and I then proceeded to spend all my time killing thousands upon thousands upon thousands of trilobites. I needed more paragons, so I was spending all my time hunting, farming, and killing so many trilobites they were going to go extinct. But I slowly and surely ranked up Missing Jaws Revenge to Omega. I had one final step to get back to where I was, and that was the Trilobite God, which, as we know, was a piece of cake. I was back. No, Jaws was back. but I needed something more, as Jaws clearly was not tanky enough. So it was towards the end of day 86 when I came across an Omega absorbent stego. This will do very nicely. So once I was tranked out, teleported home where I was able to get the kibble I needed, then shoved it in the morning and it became my friend. I would need more paragons if this stego was to be actually useful, so I was killing every trilobite and stego paragon I could find. I just would want to godlike my stego, and in order to do that I would have to fight the absorbent god. But for that I needed an absorbent boss soul. In order to get that I began to summon in and kill multiple guardian bosses until I got the soul I needed. But finally an absorbent manticore decided to show itself, only to get one shot like all the others. I placed down my god egg and hatched the absorbent god, a massive achatina. It got 2 shot. Puny god. I fed my god soul to the absorbent stego as well as some paragons I still had, but I now had my tank and DPS dealer. Not only that, but my 2 stegos would give each other a mate boost. So let's test this out. Brought out my stego bubble, summoned in a boss, and my DPS stego was able to just bifrost it down. I chose to name my absorbent stego punching bag. Even on day 89, I was able to just nuke an ultimate reflective dragon. But it was time to fight my very first Omega boss. I had to jump between my stego and Trilo in order to ensure no one died, but the Dodo Rex went down. Now, I was getting close to being ready to fight a group god, as these regular gods were no problem. So in order to get there, I wanted to imbue my saddles with God Essence. But I also needed to kill one of each of the group god variants in order to summon it in. So I began to kill gods and bosses for the souls I needed. I was feeling unstoppable. Now, I could have fought boss after boss after boss, but I felt too strong for that. So I was invited in the morning to join a gauntlet beacon. Starting out on punching bag, I was tanking hundreds of alpha bosses all at once, while some others on the server began to kill them. Punching bag was an absolute tank, though the damage was pretty lackluster. So I lent Jaws Revenge to Kaietsu so we could clear out these bosses like it was nothing. We absolutely carried, fighting even dozens of ultimate bosses, as Punching Bag and Jaws were the only ones who managed to survive that wave of ultimate bosses, since some had accidentally left the bubble of protection. Now, speaking of bubbles of protection, in the morning of day 91 I placed down a tech shield, just so I'd have that extra bit of defense for my base, in order to prevent any bad things showing up. And in the evening, I found an Omega Stalker Carno that I managed to trank out, but some dinos had messed up the effectiveness, so I used a potion to wake it up and was instantly killed by it. So I flew back on Jim, and since this was a Stalker Carno, it suddenly shredded through Jim and killed him. Rest in peace, Jim. You will be missed. I got back on my getaway Terra and tranked out the Carno again, before dodging everything else on the cliff by leading it off of it. Shoved in my kibble and now had the Omega Stalker Carno. Now, I wanted this Carno as it was one part of a hybrid and the other was an ice wyvern. So I headed into Jotunheim's wyvern trench, only for the wyvern I needed to have not spawned yet. So later in the next morning, I was hunting and killing all the ice wyverns I could. Except my hunt was prematurely ended by a stupid comet mantis. Day 93 was spent farming bosses for more souls and essence, but at this point Jaws was just shredding through everything. Even godlike bosses had no chance to even attack. Though I didn't feel confident to go to ancient tier just yet, especially since I was no longer one-shotting the godlike bosses. But if I planned to fight a group god, I would need to fight one of every god in that class. So in the morning, I set up the Omega altar, a shrine used to summon in the group gods, so I began to fight each of the gods I needed in order to summon in the ethereal group god. Teleporter, spectral, dimensional, spiritual, warp, and astral. And that's when Jaws hit a new record and dealt 1 billion damage. But I would need to be much stronger in order to fight the group gods. So day 95 was spent hunting down saber-tooth salmon to complete a quest for more paragons, but I have to say that this mod just astounds me. We're on the final few days before I fight the group god, and still it is more worthwhile to run around on foot killing everything. I really enjoyed my time in Omega once I figured out how to play it. It is incredibly unique and has some really cool features. My favorite has to be the armor and weapons though. However, the time had finally arrived. Day 100. I had some final setup to do in preparation of fighting the ethereal group god. My 2 stegos, a potion dode, a disrupted dimorph, and of course Jaws. I had enlisted the help of one of my Twitch subs, Kaietsu, to do the very important job of controlling punching bag, as I had no idea how hard this group god would be. Did the final checks on all my creatures, and summoned in the ethereal group god. A ghost-like jellyfish with 500 million health and plenty of evasion, dodging the first few hits, dealing millions of damage to my stego, who was tanking like a champ when the jellyfish failed its dodge roll and got nuked by Jaws. I was not satisfied. That was too easy. I had prepared 100 days for this? No. Let's do the Guardian Group God. I killed off all the Guardian variant gods I needed for their souls, but once I had all 6, I placed them in the Omega altar, and in came the Guardian Group God. This one with 3.8 billion health. Now we have a fight on our hands. Slowly, Jaws and I began to nuke the golem, hitting for 200 million at a time. There was an ever-looming threat. The golem was knocking back the stego as I desperately crawled to not leave the bubble. Slowly but surely dropping nuke after nuke after nuke, when finally at 335 million health left, we brought it down. Woo! Group gods down. Using the group god soul, I was able to feed it to punching bag in order to ascend it to a guardian group god stego, giving it all of the guardian abilities. So we wanted to test how much can the stego actually tank. So we started a gauntlet beacon, fighting off hundreds of bosses. Every tier up to Omega fell to our might. It was incredible. Thank you for watching and subscribe.